It is a very, very signal moment for me and for the museum and its director and the other members of staff, as well as those who are members of council. A very signal moment. We have come through a torrid COVID time and having escaped COVID and most of his relatives, we appear to be on the verge of meeting some more of them. I don't wish to meet any of them at any time soon, but nevertheless, it is for me, as I said, a very signal moment that we can get to this point where we are producing yet another journal. This journal published this year continues in the tradition of the previous journals. And let me pause for a moment to thank those previous editors who have done much to keep the flagship flying and to keep the flag flying. And let me acknowledge also the very important work of those who pioneered the Barbados Museum and its various publications. This year, we are at a crossroads, so to speak, in the sense that this year, well, no, I'm running into trouble now because the year has finished, last year has finished so quickly, and we're into 2022 now. Last year, as we moved towards the end of last year, we were at a position where we were making some momentous changes to our political setup. We were moving towards a Republican stance. In that same year, we also had the removal of the statue of Lord Nelson, one of the icons of the English presence within the New World and certainly in Barbados. And it is in that context, therefore, that the Museum Journal seems to capture these very important moments in our development, our social and political development. I don't know if you probably can't see, but here I have a copy of the Museum Journal, and on that Museum Journal, and you'll see when you get hold of it, that there is a picture of the installation of our new president. But in the far right corner of this back, you find a picture of the removal of the statue of Lord Nelson. We thought it would be evocative for this moment to have that on the book, on the cover of the current journal. After having made that point, I wish to then move very quickly to what we're doing in the editorial. In the editorial, we thought that we would capture this political moment. And therefore, in the editorial, which I entitled From the Oistins Charter, 1652 to Independence, 1966 to Republic, 2021. And then there is my first subheading is Antecedents of Republicanism in the Barbados Charter of 1652. What in fact we were attempting to do in the editorial is to capture the evolution of politics in Barbados, evolution of a parliamentary tradition. And in capturing that evolution of parliamentary tradition, we pointed out that those who settled in Barbados and signed what is then called the Oistins Charter were in fact expressing and espousing what we call elements of a democracy that they did not believe in. By that I mean that those who began the Oistins Charter proclaiming that they had rights as Englishmen were at the same time enslavers who did not foresee at any time in the near future or the far future that the enslaved people would ever have any rights. In last year's journal, I had in fact done a transcript of the 1661 slave law. And they were fully aware by the time we get just around this time that there were laws that govern the enslaved, but the laws said very specifically that the enslaved were not entitled to be governed by British law. If you read the 1661 slave law, excuse me, it says that the enslaved people were not entitled to be governed by British law. More than that, the 1661 slave law also makes it clear that the enslaved were of another kind. And by another kind, I said last year, what that really meant was that they were human beings, but not quite. So there's something which debarred them from polite company. So in this year's editorial, I'm really tracing what happens as Englishmen sought to introduce what we later come to call the old representative system. That's really what they're trying to put in place. But the point is very clear that that old representative system did not, in fact, include the enslaved. And later, it hardly even included those who were emancipated. So once we had gone through that, then they begin to trace after what we call the riots, some people call it the riots, some people call it disturbances, the events of the 1930s, when for the very first time after, Black African people in Barbados got the right to vote. When I traced that point, and what happened in that context was that that once they got the right to vote, a semblance of democracy began to fill our political landscape. And since that time, as we move towards independence, as the editorial points out, there were a lot of discussions which had to do with what shape was our political system going to have as we went into the future. Ultimately, we ended that debate, I said first with independence, which kept the British monarchy in place, and now we have gone the next step, and we have said goodbye to the English monarchy in our political system. You know, it's very interesting. I attended the ceremony, and Prince Charles was there, and it was particularly evocative again when the police band played Old Lang Syne as we came to the end of the installation. It really was a poignant moment, and the editorial seeks to capture this change.